Hey, welcome to After She Left. Stay till the end and don't forget to subscribe. My name is Oliver. I'm 36 years old and I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. That morning started like any other. The sound of Clara humming softly in the kitchen as I got dressed for work, her voice blending with the low rumble of the coffee maker. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, warm and familiar. Babe, can you grab my bank card from my purse? She called out, her tone light and easy. It's in the front pocket. I paused for a second, just watching her from the doorway. She looked so calm, so at ease, her hair tied up in a messy bun, her fingers drumming out a gentle rhythm on the countertop. It almost felt like a scene out of a commercial, perfect and unbothered. Sure, I said, turning away and crossing the small living room to where her purse sat on the edge of the couch. I reached in, fingers brushing against loose change and half-opened lip balm tubes, feeling for the smooth edge of her bank card. Instead, my fingers closed around something thicker, a crisp envelope, its paper smooth and expensive between my fingertips. I frowned, curiosity pricking at me. I pulled it out slowly, feeling a faint buzz of unease. The logo on the envelope was unmistakable. Seaside Pearl Inn, a swanky little coastal place we'd once talked about visiting for an anniversary that never came. My breath hitched a little. For a second, I thought it might be a surprise for me. An early gift, maybe, or something sweet she'd been planning in secret. I opened the envelope carefully, hoping for a handwritten note. Instead, there was a folded receipt inside, the kind you get at checkout. My stomach tightened as I read it. 1 luxury suite. 2 guests. Check-in date 3 days ago. 3 days ago, Clara had told me she was staying late to help her friend Lily move. She'd come home that night with tired eyes and a smile, telling me how much Lily had needed her help. But there it was, right in front of me. Proof that she had been somewhere else entirely. The kitchen noises seemed to fade as I stared at the receipt, the words blurring around the edges. My hands felt clammy, my throat dry. I wanted to believe there was some kind of mistake, some innocent reason for all of this. But the numbers didn't lie. The dates were clear. The suite was real. I tucked the receipt back into the envelope and slid it deep into her purse, my heart pounding in my chest. My hand shook as I pulled out her bank card, the card she'd asked me for like nothing had happened, like everything was fine. I walked back into the kitchen, my mind racing, and handed it to her with what I hoped was a steady smile. She took it with a grateful little grin. "Thanks, babe," she said. She turned back to the sink, her song picking up again as she rinsed out her coffee mug. I watched her for a moment, the soft curve of her shoulders, the easy way she moved, but all I could think about was that envelope in her purse. That night at the Seaside Pearl. The lie she'd told me so easily. I walked out of the kitchen and leaned against the hallway wall, the receipt burned into my memory. I didn't know what to do or what to say. All I knew was that everything felt different now. And there was no going back. That night I couldn't sleep. The soft whir of the ceiling fan did nothing to quiet the racing thoughts in my head. I kept picturing that receipt, the neat rows of text spelling out exactly where Clara had been. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her name, the suite number, the date. By morning, I decided I couldn't keep it to myself. I had to know the truth, even if it hurt to hear it. Clara was drying dishes when I finally found the nerve to bring it up. The morning light slanted through the kitchen window, painting everything in a soft glow that felt at odds with the tension building inside me. She was humming again, like she always did when she was in a good mood. I stood in the doorway, gripping the folded receipt in my hand, my palms slick with sweat. My voice came out lower than I intended. "Clara, can we talk?" She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes bright. "Sure, what's up?" I held the receipt out to her, my hand trembling a little. "This was in your purse, from the Seaside Pearl Inn." For a second, her smile didn't fade. She just looked at the paper like it was a piece of junk mail. But then she took it from me, her fingers brushing mine, and I watched the smile slip from her face like a mask falling away. "Oh," she said softly, folding the receipt in half again. That, I echoed, my throat tight. 3 days ago, 2 guests, you told me you were with Lily." She placed the dish towel on the counter, moving slowly, deliberately. "It wasn't like that, Oliver. You're making this into something it isn't." "Then tell me what it is," I said. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Because right now, it looks like you were with someone else, at a place we always said we'd go together. She sighed and leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms. I wasn't there for me, she said. A colleague of mine, she was supposed to go, but she couldn't. It was a gift she got, and it couldn't be refunded, so I took it. I blinked at her, trying to make sense of the words. You took it? With who? Clara shrugged, her face unreadable. With another colleague. It wasn't romantic. It was just easier to bring someone along than let it go to waste. My stomach twisted at how smooth it sounded, like she'd practiced it in front of the mirror. You're saying you went with someone from work? For fun? Not fun, she said quickly. It was just convenient. I didn't think you'd mind. I stared at her, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. The way she said it, so calm, so sure, it didn't feel real. My thoughts felt jumbled, like I was trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. You lied to me, I said finally. You told me you were helping Lily move. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Her eyes shifted to the side, avoiding mine. I didn't want to make it a big deal, she said. I knew how you'd react, and I didn't want the drama. So I said I was with Lily. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The easy way she said it, like lying was no big thing, like my trust was just something she could brush aside. I don't know what to say, I said quietly. My hands were shaking, so I tucked them in my pockets. I feel like I don't even know you. Clara forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oliver, you're overthinking this. It was just a night. It meant nothing. I nodded slowly, but inside my mind was reeling. Her words felt rehearsed, too smooth, too perfect. And that smile, the way it didn't touch her eyes, that's what stuck with me. She turned back to the dishes like nothing had happened, humming that same old tune as she picked up the next plate. I watched her, feeling the distance between us like a chasm. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to take the easy way out and pretend everything was okay. But the more I watched her, the more I saw the cracks, the forced calm, the quick answers. It all felt like a show she'd put on just for me. I didn't push it. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked away, because I knew if I stayed in that kitchen another second, I'd say something I couldn't take back. But inside, I was done pretending. I'd seen enough to know that something was broken between us, and no amount of careful explanations could fix it. After that morning in the kitchen, something shifted between us. Clara went back to her usual routine, humming in the kitchen, sending quick texts to her friends, and chatting about her day like nothing had changed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living with a stranger. At first, I tried to push it out of my mind. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything she'd said was true, that it was just a harmless trip, a favor for a colleague. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and every time she smiled or touched my arm, it felt like she was slipping on a mask. So I stopped asking questions out loud. Instead, I started watching. I noticed how she started working later than usual. She'd come home with the faint scent of a new perfume on her neck, one I didn't recognize, something fresh and expensive. When I asked about it, she'd brush it off with a laugh. Just a new sample, she'd say, her eyes never quite meeting mine. I started keeping a small notebook in my nightstand drawer. I'd never been the kind of guy to write things down, but it felt like the only way to make sense of what was happening. I wrote down the nights she said she was working late, the days she came home with that perfume still clinging to her skin. I wrote down every small lie, every excuse. One name kept popping up in her stories: Grant. At first, it was harmless enough, just a new coworker she mentioned here and there. But then it was Grant who helped her stay late to finish a project. Grant who bought her coffee because she looked tired. Grant who was just so funny, she said, with a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into every little detail. But the more I watched, the clearer it became. One evening, I came home from work early. Clara wasn't there yet. I went to pour myself a drink and found a lipstick-stained glass on the counter, a deep red smudge on the rim that didn't match any of the shades she usually wore. My stomach dropped. When she got home, I asked about it. She blinked, surprised, and then let out a small laugh. Oh, that? It must have been from when Lily came over. I poured her a glass of wine. I wanted to believe her. but the way her hand tightened around the strap of her purse told me everything I needed to know. Some nights I'd reach out to touch her in bed just to feel close to her again, but she'd flinch. Just a small movement, almost nothing. I'd pull back, my chest aching with a cold kind of certainty. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never really had been. I stopped trying to talk to her about it. I stopped bringing up the late nights, the new perfume, the way she always seemed half present, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. Instead, I watched and wrote it all down in that little notebook. It felt strange, like I was studying someone I used to know. Every lie was another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to see, but I couldn't look away. At night, I'd lie awake next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her even breathing. I wondered what she was dreaming about, if she was dreaming of Grant, or of the life she was building without me. The thought made my chest feel tight, like I couldn't get enough air. One night, she was in the shower and I picked up her phone from the nightstand. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who snooped, who dug for answers he didn't want. But my hands moved on their own. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding in my chest. Grant's name was there, popping up again and again. Little inside jokes, messages about late nights at work, reminders to bring that bottle of wine you love. I felt sick, like my heart had been hollowed out. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I didn't say a word when she came out of the bathroom, her hair damp and her skin smelling of soap. I just smiled, and she smiled back, and it felt like we were playing parts in a play that was almost over. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to keep pretending. Not anymore. Clara's birthday came at the end of February, right in the middle of a particularly brutal cold snap. I did what I always did, made her breakfast in bed, left flowers on her nightstand, tried to pretend like everything was still normal between us. She smiled and kissed my cheek, but her eyes flicked away like she couldn't quite meet my gaze. We had dinner that night at a little Italian place we'd been to a dozen times before. She seemed relaxed, laughing at the waiter's jokes and talking about how good the pasta was. But I noticed how she kept checking her phone, her thumb swiping across the screen like she was waiting for something or someone else. I paid the bill and took her home, and for a moment, it felt like maybe things could still be okay. Maybe it was just my paranoia getting the best of me. Maybe I'd wake up one morning and all of this would be gone, just a bad dream. But the next morning, as she lay sleeping, I picked up her phone from the nightstand again. I told myself I wouldn't open it, that I wouldn't go down that path. But my hands didn't listen. There it was, a charge from an upscale restaurant across town, a place I knew she'd never been with me. My chest tightened. The payment was from the night of her birthday. Not the Italian place we went to, but some fancy spot with a rooftop view. I set the phone down carefully, my hands shaking. I didn't say anything to her when she woke up. I just made her coffee, gave her a smile, and watched her move around the kitchen like she had nothing to hide. That evening after dinner, I asked her a question I'd been holding back for weeks. "Do you feel like we're drifting apart?" I asked quietly, my eyes on the table. She looked up, her brow furrowing like she didn't understand. "What? No, of course not." I watched her face as she said it, the way her mouth tightened just a little, the way her eyes flicked away for a split second before coming back to mine. "Are you sure?" I pressed gently. "Because I don't know. Sometimes it feels like there's this gap between us, like you're somewhere else, even when you're here." She let out a soft laugh, but it sounded forced, brittle. "Oliver, don't be ridiculous. You're imagining things. We're fine. Everything's fine." I wanted to believe her so badly, but the way her smile faltered at the edges, the way her voice went flat, told me everything I needed to know. I didn't push it any further. I just nodded and let it drop, because I realized in that moment that I wasn't really asking her. I was done looking for answers. I didn't need her to confess. I didn't need her to explain. I already knew. The next few days passed in a blur. We went through the motions of being a couple, small talk over coffee, shared dinners that tasted like cardboard in my mouth. She laughed at my jokes. She kissed me goodnight. But it all felt hollow, like we were both reciting lines we'd memorized a long time ago. I didn't confront her again. I didn't bring up the receipt or the new perfume or the name that kept popping up in her stories. I didn't want to fight about it anymore. I didn't want her to lie to me one more time. Instead, I started to let go. I spent more time at work, taking on extra projects just to stay out of the house. I went for long walks by the harbor after dinner, the cold air burning in my lungs, the sound of the waves helping to quiet the noise in my head. And every night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to her even breathing beside me and wondering how we got here. By the end of that week, I knew I was done pretending. I wasn't searching for the truth anymore. I was just waiting for the right moment to walk away. It was a cold Saturday morning when I decided to call Marcus. We hadn't talked in years, but I knew he'd understand. He'd been a cop for over a decade before switching to private investigations, and if there was anyone I could trust to handle this carefully, it was him. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm and warm. "Oliver, man. Long time no talk. What's up?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of the question I was about to ask. "I need your help, Marcus. It's about Clara. I think I think she's seeing someone else." He was quiet for a second, then let out a low sigh. "I'm sorry, Oliver. That's rough. You sure you want to do this?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I just need to know for sure." We met at a little coffee shop near the river later that day. Marcus looked the same as he always had. Steady, dependable, with a sharp glint in his eyes that said he missed nothing. I handed him a small stack of notes I'd scribbled down. Dates, times, the name that kept popping up. Grant. He flipped through the pages, his brows drawn together. "You've been paying attention," he said quietly. "I didn't know what else to do," I admitted. I couldn't just sit there and pretend nothing was happening. Marcus nodded. "I get it. I'll look into it. But you need to be ready for whatever I find, Oliver. You might not like the truth." "I know," I said. And I did. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. The next week passed in slow motion. I went to work. I came home. Clara laughed and told me about her day, and I nodded and pretended to listen. But inside, I was somewhere else waiting for Marcus to call. When he finally did, it was a Thursday night. I was sitting in the living room, half watching a rerun on TV, when my phone buzzed. My hands went clammy. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice low. "I've got something for you. You want to meet?" I drove to his office, a cramped little space above an old record store. He was waiting for me, a manila envelope sitting on the desk in front of him. He didn't say much, just slid the envelope across the table and watched me as I opened it. Inside were photographs. Clara and Grant, sitting close together at a fancy restaurant, sharing a bottle of wine. Clara leaning in to whisper something in his ear, her hand resting on his arm. Clara laughing, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in months. I flipped through the pictures slowly, my chest tightening with each one. There was no denying it now. No more lies, no more excuses. It was all there in black and white. Marcus cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, man." I shook my head, my fingers brushing over the last photo. Clara and Grant in front of a hotel, his hand on the small of her back as they walked inside together. "Don't be," I said quietly. "I asked for this. I needed to know." "Do you want me to dig deeper?" Marcus asked gently. "Find out how long it's been going on? Who else might know?" I looked up at him and shook my head. "No, I've seen enough." I left Marcus's office with the envelope tucked under my arm, my mind strangely calm. There was no more guessing, no more second-guessing myself or wondering if I was just being paranoid. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. When I got home, Clara was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a small smile on her lips. She looked up at me and gave me that same practiced smile she'd been giving me for weeks. "Hey," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "How was your day?" I just nodded, my face blank. "Fine," I said. "Just fine." I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I didn't ask her any more questions. I didn't need to hear her lies anymore. Because in that moment, looking at her, her hair falling softly over her shoulder, her eyes bright and curious, I realized I felt nothing at all. Not anger, not heartbreak, just a quiet resolve. I was done. I didn't do it in a rush. I didn't slam doors or scream. There was no big blow-up, no messy confrontation. I just started packing. It was early on a Saturday morning when I quietly opened the old suitcase that had been gathering dust in the back of the closet. The house was still and silent, the kind of hush that always seemed to settle in right before dawn. Clara was still asleep in our bed, the faint sound of her breathing drifting down the hallway. I moved carefully, methodically. I pulled out my shirts, folding them neatly. Jeans, socks, the navy blue sweater she always said brought out my eyes. I laid them one by one in the suitcase, my hands steady, my mind clear. I didn't take much, just what I needed to start over. I left behind anything that felt like it belonged to the life we'd shared. The framed photos of us smiling at the beach, the anniversary watch she'd given me, the one that had stopped working months ago, even the little coffee mug we'd bought together at that farmer's market in Vermont. I left it all. When I was done, I went to the safe in the closet and took out my share of the savings. I didn't want to fight over money later. I wanted a clean break, no messy arguments, no half-hearted apologies. I transferred my portion to a separate account and left the rest for her. She could have the house, the furniture, the memories. I didn't leave a note. I didn't see the point. There was nothing I could say that would change what had happened. I took one last look around the house, the kitchen where we used to dance in the mornings, the living room where we spent so many quiet nights, the hallway where I'd first kissed her. It all felt like it belonged to someone else now, like I'd been renting a life that was never really mine. When I walked out the door, the cold morning air hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I just kept walking, my suitcase rolling behind me, the sound of its wheels on the sidewalk, loud in the quiet street. I didn't have a plan, not really. I just knew I couldn't stay here anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I couldn't keep trying to fix something that was already broken beyond repair. I found a small apartment in a town about 40 minutes away, a little place with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it felt like mine. Nobody knew me there. Nobody knew what I'd left behind. I got a job at a local repair shop, fixing things that could be fixed. Cars, small engines, anything that would take my mind off the past. The work was honest and steady, and there was something comforting in that. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not Clara, not mutual friends, not my family. I wanted to build something for myself, something that didn't have anything to do with lies or secrets. In the evenings, I'd sit on the old wooden steps outside my apartment, watching the sunset behind the rows of old brick buildings. It wasn't much, but it felt real in a way that nothing had in a long time. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. I didn't reach out to Clara after I left. I didn't want to hear her excuses or her apologies. And I didn't want to see her face twist with that fake concern she'd gotten so good at faking. But news has a way of traveling, even when you're not looking for it. About a month after I moved into my new apartment, I ran into an old friend of ours, Paul, at the grocery store. We hadn't talked in ages, and when he recognized me, his face lit up with surprise. "Oliver, man, it's been forever. How you holding up?" he asked. I gave him a small smile, trying to keep it easy. "I'm good. Just starting fresh." Paul's smile faltered just a little, like he wasn't sure if he should say what was on his mind. "You hear about Clara?" he asked, lowering his voice a notch. I shook my head. "No, I haven't talked to her since I left." He let out a slow breath. "Man, it's been a mess. She tried to play it cool at first, like nothing had happened. But word got around about her and that guy, Grant, right? People started seeing them out together more and more, and, well, it wasn't exactly the secret she thought it was." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "What happened?" Paul shifted from foot to foot, his eyes flicking away. Apparently, Grant took off, just ghosted her. No calls, no goodbyes. One day he was there, the next, gone. I didn't say anything, just let the words sink in. She's been having a rough time," Paul went on. "She lost her job, not officially fired, but she's on some kind of indefinite leave. I heard she's been bouncing between friends' couches and some tiny apartment she found. Gave the cat away. She's not the same anymore." I let out a long breath. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt nothing, like I was hearing about a stranger's life, not the woman I'd once shared a bed with. Paul kept talking, filling me in on the gossip. "Clara tried to call me," he said. "She asked around, but no one knew where I'd gone. I'd made sure of that. She's been trying to find you," Paul said, his tone soft. "She said she wants to talk, but I told her I didn't know where you were." "Thanks," I said quietly, and I meant it. After we said our goodbyes, I drove back to my apartment, my mind quiet. I didn't feel any triumph in knowing Clara was struggling. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. It wasn't about that anymore. Some nights I'd catch myself thinking about her, remembering the way she used to laugh at my dumb jokes or the way her hair fell across her face when she slept. But those memories felt like they belonged to another life, another person, and I was done carrying them. I still saw glimpses of her sometimes. Friends of friends would mention her name in passing, little fragments of gossip. She deleted her social media, they said. She dropped out of her old circles. She was trying to disappear. Maybe she was trying to find herself again, or maybe she was just running from the wreckage she'd left behind. I didn't hate her for it. I didn't want revenge or some kind of apology. I just wanted to keep living my life, one day at a time, without the weight of her lies on my back. And every time I thought of her, the only thing I felt was distance. A clean, final distance that felt like freedom. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. My life settled into a quiet rhythm that I hadn't known I needed. In the mornings, I'd stop by the small diner down the street for coffee and a warm muffin, the kind of simple comfort that reminded me I was still here, still moving forward. The repair shop was nothing glamorous, but it was honest work. I liked the way the grease got under my fingernails, the way a good fix felt in my hands. The smell of oil and old engines was a far cry from the world I'd left behind, but it felt real in a way that nothing else had in a long time. That's where I met Emma. She owned the bakery next door, a sweet little place that always smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. She'd stop by with leftover pastries at the end of the day, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and her hands dusted with flour. At first, we just talked about nothing: the weather, the weird customers she got sometimes, the way the light turned golden in the late afternoon. But there was an ease in her laugh, a softness in her eyes that felt like a balm on old wounds. We didn't rush anything. We didn't need to. I'd stop by her bakery after work, and she'd hand me a warm loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper. Sometimes she'd close up early and come by the shop, perching on the edge of the workbench while I tightened bolts and wiped down wrenches. It felt different with her. No games, no secrets. Just the quiet comfort of two people learning how to trust again, one small step at a time. A year later, we got married in a tiny ceremony under an old oak tree by the river. No big speeches, no elaborate decorations, just her in a simple white dress and me in a shirt I'd ironed myself. Our closest friends gathered around us. When we said our vows, it felt like the first honest promise I'd made in years. 3 years after that, at a company holiday party, I saw Clara one last time. She was thinner than I remembered, her hair cut short and her smile a pale echo of the one I used to know. She was standing by the bar, her hands wrapped around a glass of wine, her eyes scanning the room like she was searching for someone to save her. When her gaze landed on me, she froze. For a second, it felt like the whole room went quiet, but then Emma's laughter drifted back to me, warm and sweet, and I turned back to the conversation we were having. Jokes about the new guy at work, plans for the weekend, small, simple things that felt like home. I didn't go over to Clara. I didn't need to. She didn't approach me either. We just stood there for a moment, two people with nothing left to say. When Emma came back to my side, she slipped her hand into mine, her fingers warm and sure. I looked at her and felt the kind of peace I used to think was just a story people told themselves to sleep at night. We left the party early, driving home through quiet streets lined with twinkling Christmas lights. I watched Emma's face in the soft glow of the dashboard, her eyes bright and easy, her smile real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.